Greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm Professor Spira, and I'm here with Tony Baliby for another great discussion. And this video, we want to talk about the concept of the plantation system and its relationship to practitioners of the Mucusless Diet Healing System. So this sort of has historical connotation to it. It's kind of an allegory that a lot of historically black folks in America and really around the world have kind of used this concept as a way to understand their power dynamics and the relationship that they have to other worlds. And the real famous one, one of the early famous ones, is probably Malcolm X, who said that there's the difference between the field Negro and the house Negro, and historically there was a very different dynamics involved, where how the house slaves were treated differently than the field slaves. And so he said the field slaves would be like the field Negroes, and house slaves are like the house Negroes or the servants, and they were treated different. And the house slaves, they were more comfortable. They were treated with a little bit more dignity, respect. They were, they might have had a chance to be in the house, and they had a different experience. So they were kind of like, I kind of want this experience. I don't want to, I don't want to be out there with the field Negroes, and they would feel that they were better than everybody else, that they were better than the other than the other field Negroes. And also, oftentimes it might be lighter skin. They might be the offspring, the illegitimate offspring of one of the of one of the plantation owners, and so on and so forth. And then the field Negroes had a whole different ethos. So that was Malcolm X. Recently, Brother Air, he sort of expounded on this allegory, and he was saying, he was trying to look at, well, what does he represent in this sort of narrative of the slave? And anybody can, and this isn't a race thing. This is based on this idea that we are unliberated. Breath Aaron Ensemble used the phrase physiological liberation, meaning we are doing the same things that people that have been oppressed have done throughout history. We are in a position of trying to free ourselves, trying to liberate ourselves. So we use this type of concept. And Brother Air said, well, on the slave ship, there were several different types of slaves. You had the slaves that were trying to fight themselves free. It would, and oftentimes that ended badly because they would get shot on the spot or get beat or whooped to death in front of everybody. You had the ones that just didn't do anything, that just stayed quiet and just like, okay, if I don't move, maybe they won't notice me, maybe I won't get pummeled and killed. But then you had the ones that would just jump overboard. And he said that he related to the slaves that would just jump overboard. And for him, that represented taking his destiny into his own hands, and that there's that chance, that possibility of surviving, that you could be in the middle of the ocean, but these, physiologically speaking, these folks from Africa, of being kind of the cream of the crop, just maybe you would have a better chance on your own out in the middle of the ocean swimming than you would have trying to deal with these people on this ship. And so I thought that was a really great allegory. They hadn't thought about that as a pretty classic. So then me and Tony, they were kind of talking like, well, how can we break this thing down in terms of particular black community and people that practice the Mucusless diet, kind of where do we stand? So I'll turn it over to Tony, and you kind of set up a bit what you were talking about in relationship to this concept, because we started to break down the different positions, and so go ahead.
Yeah, so we were talking about the health movement, the plant-based dieting, and where different careers, you could say, kind of fit into the plantation model. So, for instance, we were talking about like the black, strong male figure, the what you could call the brute, becomes like the football player, the athlete, the boxer, and this person is used by the enslaver as a source of income, as a source of achievement. Like my strong man can beat your strong man. Let's put up our bets, and then you have then you would have like the religious model, which would be like the enslaved spiritual or religious figure. And this was one of the only areas that black people had, particularly later.
Uninhibited,
particularly later in enslavement. In the beginning, you weren't allowed to read, you weren't allowed to have your own church services. And then later, it was like, no, you can read, but only the Bible. You can have gatherings, but only church gatherings. And so it became the only area. And then you found black folks using that as a stand for like civil rights movements coming out of the church. So you have the religious model, and you have many plant-based people who follow the religious or spiritual model. And then and we were kind of contemplating, like Brother Air, like where would the mucusless diet fit? Because it's not really, I wouldn't say it's not the religious or spiritual pseudoscience model. And we're not talking about getting strong to the point where you're like beating everybody in a race and you're like the most strong athlete. And so this level of health is much different. And I was catering it to the what I call the secret garden concept, which is black folks weren't allowed to garden. They were given the worst mucus and pus, like old potatoes or old cornmeal mush, and of course the famous like extra parts of the pig, and the neck and stuff like that of animals.
The hood.
But our people were not living on just that. Right. Enslaved black folks they had gardens that were secret gardens. That 1 a.m., 2 a.m. they would go till up this garden, pick the ripe stuff, make like okra-based soups, make salads, have tomatoes, and this was so off the plantation. It wasn't allowed. It wasn't discussed about. But the black folks would share it amongst themselves. Like, here's some tomatoes, here's some sweet potatoes or whatever would grow, some okra, some herbs, some greens, collard greens, and there was the information of the herbs that came from Africa. One famous story is seeds being hidden in the braids on the slave ship. People would put seeds actually into their braids and bring them over and then use that. And they used the information of herbs and plants that they had back in Africa. So I was kind of catering like the mucusless diet is kind of like that secret garden piece,
Yeah, and that's a great, that's definitely a great connection to make with that, because we are kind of we don't fit into these other aspects of the institution of society. If society is an institution itself, because we always talk about individual institutions within the society, but what if the society is a large institution and it has these various arms that you're supposed to fit into? You're supposed to find your place, or you have had your place given to you. So as we said, there's since the beginning of this type of oppression, in terms of, we talk about the plantation model, you had the brute, which is tied in with, being strong and muscular and being able to work. John Henry was a steel driving man type of aspect. You had the religious leaders, because Tony said that was really the only place that African Americans were able to be unhindered in what they were doing. Now, that came after they had already been oftentimes forced to become Christian, and so that's that's the reality, harsh realities of this thing. And so, but once there were, of course, instances where African religions were kind of combined with Christianity, and we call that syncretic religions, and that kind of thing happened. But so you have that, and there's a lot of the plant-based leaders that kind of talk like that, or they come from a very this spiritual rhetoric, and then it's like, well, what about us? So I like that secret garden. The other thing that I identify with is the Underground Railroad part of it. Like, I'm fighting. Like, I might not jump off the, I might make it to America. I might not jump off the boat, but I will leave the plantation. I will do everything in my power to leave, and I might get caught. They might cut my ears off, but one of these times, like, I'm gonna run out of limbs for them to cut off. I'm gonna make it one of these times. And then, like I said, one of my greatest inspirations in life is Harriet Tubman, because for me, she's really the only saint, like, of a historical figure that I would personally consider like she was a saint, like a real saint. There's a lot of the people that, figures that are given this sainthood type of thing, I don't see it. But with her, I'm like, that's a real saint there. And so I try to, I try to come out like that. And then that gets back into part of Plato's The Cave allegory, where it basically says, and I hope you guys are familiar with that. If not, go look it up, check it out, the Plato's Cave allegory. But it's you see that all over the place. It's the same story that's in the Matrix, where there's this not, you don't even know you're a slave, you don't even know you're oppressed, but you all of a sudden, you by yourself get this information, and it changes everything. It changes how you see the world, and you notice that everybody else that you used to be that you were close with, they are enslaved. So when you go back to try and free them, they turn on you. They actually will try to kill you for trying to save them, because they don't know that they're slaves. And so that's what, Harriet Tubman was like, I could have saved a lot more people if they would have even realized that they were slaves, if they wanted to be free. And so that's what I feel like. And for those of us that are, it's kind of like the hardcore, almost, in some ways, kind of like thankless job of like, okay, we're putting this information out here. A lot of people don't want it. A lot of people, they see it and they don't want to have nothing to do with it. Like, oh, that's insane. And because it doesn't fit into these other things, if I was on here talking with all this, spiritual rhetoric, I probably would get more followers, because a lot of people like that. And I've studied all that, and if I wanted to do that, I could just start talking all kinds of stuff, and people like, wow, that sounds really deep. I like how that sounds. Let me do that. Or buy into a thing that's already established, one of the systems. I can't do that, because that would hinder me. That would inhibit me, and I can't fit into that kind of thing. Or if I was talking about athletics and and running marathons and that side of the thing.
Right.
That's established, and you're always going to have followers coming from that side. In the modern day, there's the weight loss thing, and I do talk about weight loss because I lost a lot of weight, but it's not something we emphasize, and it's not something that's discussed, where we're not looking for people to be into the mucusless diet just to lose weight. We don't frame things like that, where like that's the only reason you're getting into this is to lose some weight. So that's another kind of established road for getting this kind of information out there. So
yeah. And it's interesting because the jumping off the boat, the garden, and the Underground Railroad, I see a transitional diet in all of those. Because if you jump off the boat, you're fasting. If you got a garden, you're eating the plants.
Right.
And if you're on the Underground Railroad piece, you got to know how to survive on herbs and stuff. You might steal a chicken here, or you might, some people are going to be eating meat.
Somebody might give
that.
you a little food here, but there's a lot of fasting going on. And that's something they don't talk about.
That's transitional.
Yeah.
So you're fasting. You might take some herbs. You might pick some berries. All across North America, one of the most prevalent pieces is berries. That's one of the most prevalent growing fruits. And or you might find some apples or some pears. So you're going to be transitional dieting and all of that. Whereas in the athletic piece, football, boxing, and just being the brute, that actually is an encouragement of mucus and pus. And with the religious piece, I don't know, it just depends where you're at with it. You might have a religious doctrine of diet, or you might not, but it's not really implied,
I mean, here's a problem with that. Historically, what has religion been used to do?
Control the masses.
Thank you. We hate to say it, we don't, it's no disrespect anywhere, but it's like, whenever you read, I encourage people to, read history books, but you always had to bring your lens with you. You had to bring your analytical lens to understand how, racism and sexism and everything else inspired the people that wrote these histories. But if you do enough research, you can find some trends and some good information out there. And historically, religion, and we're not, and I'm not saying spirituality, because then that's a whole other discussion of what's the difference between religion and spirituality. Is a huge difference. But religion in itself has traditionally been used to control people, to control the masses, to control what they think, how they think. And like I was saying with the slaves, there's, I don't want to get too deep into, get me back in my Ashraf Kwesi mode, but but it's like, it's a situation where if you believe a certain thing, and then at gunpoint you force other people to believe what you believe, and you do that over generation after generation after generation, how many generations does it take before that person comes into that and they just think, well, it's just natural. This is normal. This is natural. This is what we believe. It's what my parents believe. It's what I'm going to teach my children. It becomes a tradition. And how safe are you in the context of African Americans? And this is where race gets involved. It's a touchy subject, but when you start looking at the paintings and all the depictions of different religious figures, every culture around the world makes their religious figures in their own image. So, Buddha was from India, but a lot of Asians took to Buddhism, and so there's a lot of representations of Buddha that look Asian. So when you talk about Christianity and African Americans, there was a disconnect there, and a lot of people would argue that served to sort of further enable that kind of psychological warfare. And there's a video that Brother Air created called Psychological Wars that you can find. You can look it up. Maybe I'll put a link to it under there. It does a good job at sort of exploring this aspect. To me, why this conversation is important is because we're talking about physical, mental, and spiritual liberation. And if you are hemmed up in other people's programs, if mentally and physically, if you're addicted to this is their food, they're putting their poisons in it. If you're not controlling what you put in your own mouth, then they got you. They're running you. If you can't control what and how you think, you're caught in their programs. I mean, really, anytime you use the word ism, I heard, I think I had somebody said this, it was a professor of mine or something, but anytime you use the word ism, you're already caught into some form of indoctrination. Fruitarianism, these isms, you're already there. And after I did that, I mean, as I don't use the term, eritism, I kind of get away from that because it's a limiting term. I'll still use it every once in a while, but just this concept of isms, is very problematic. And so to me, it's about, like I said, you got the physical, the mental. In some of the other videos, we're talking about this mental kind of undoing. It's almost like you break down to a certain extent. You break it down and it puts it back together properly. Right. And then the spiritual, and what do we do about that? And for me personally, it's been part of a long path, and a path where I'm seeking truth and seeking understanding, and not just some kind of like intellectualizing of these concepts that are kind of like, almost like intellectual candy. There's some concepts that some spiritual masters will use that are basically like candy. They're not necessarily leading you to work and do the work that you need to do to be liberated. It's kind of like, here's some stuff for you to nibble on. Like, that sounds good. Live in the now. Yeah. What I mean? It's like, it's just like, there's work to be done. And that's my point, right. Because that's almost like the many slaves that said that wouldn't leave with Harriet Tubman, that basically said, well, Jesus is my savior. I'm gonna stick it out here. I'm gonna, because it's dangerous out there. We're gonna be running and dogs are chasing us, and I could get killed. You could also get killed where you're at, and many did. And so using these concepts as a way to almost like stunt your growth, keep you addicted to the group mentality, the group think. And who's leading that group think? Well, there's your oppressor. Look at the leader and you'll find your oppressors right there running your thing. I'm saying, free yourself, free your mind, right. Free your physiology. It's about liberation. And
exactly, man. We're talking about the freedom of the enslaved. We're talking about physiological liberation, psychological liberation, and to me, it's like being an athlete is not going to free you. There are some people who think that, like, oh, if I take their little college, they're gonna pay some of my college thing, so I'm just gonna be a football player to get somewhere. And that usually doesn't happen. 75, 85% of the time, it doesn't happen. Uh, going down the religious path, the organized religious path, rarely leads to real freedom. Because we're talking about you're accepting somebody else's model, and they could even be your own people. But if you accept somebody else's model for life, you're not a free human to have your own insight, your own understandings. So once again, jumping off the ship, running away from the plantation, or trying to eat healthier on the plantation are different aspects in the plantation model.
Yeah,
different
piece,
strategies in the plantation model of getting some kind of liberation.
Right.
And that's where this mucusless diet piece fits in. It's a pathway to liberation. And something else you said that was interesting is you talked about addiction. And I think it was Brother Air who said, or maybe somebody said it to him, or he said it, I don't remember, but if you're at war with your enslaver and they're over there cooking fried chicken and you're over here in the woods because you don't have a civilization no more, you don't have a society no more, so you left the enslaved society and you're living in the woods, you don't got the grill, you don't got the farm, and they could be over there frying the bacon, frying the chicken, and you're over here nibbling on berries and herbs. If you're addicted to mucus and pus, you cannot resist.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And we could take it to the deeper raw food vegan level. Like, most of the stuff in the woods is not fatty fruits. Most of the stuff in the woods is not vegan meat options. So mucusless dieting and fasting and transitioning is the only thing that will allow you to live in the woods, or it's the only thing that will allow you to transition out of a system that you're addicted to, because mucusless foods are really the only natural food. You know what I mean? So
well, and that's where the your paleo folks and your meat eaters will come in and say, yeah, but if you're out in the woods, then you're supposed to kill the animals because there's not really enough fruit and there's not enough stuff, and so then you're hunter, the hunter and gathering model, which is based in the grand fall of humanity, pus and mucus eating.
Exactly.
We humans physiologically have been pus eaters for a very relatively short period of time, compared to plant-based eaters. And people that do all the archaeological digs try to try to find a way to not say it, but they can't really deny it. Humans haven't been eating dead animal carcass that long, and it wasn't, and they I don't know, you have to ask a paleo person. I'm sure they have a theory on cooked versus raw meat eating, and when humans started transitioning to fired foods as opposed to the raw and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, for me, the question is, what's the human capable of? Is the human capable of eating a plant-based diet in which living animals aren't killed as a way to get sustenance, and obviously what we're finding out and what other people historically have found out is that not only is it possible, but it's actually what's natural for humans to be plant-based eaters, and it's the only way that humans are really in tune with natural laws. And if you want to see people that are not in tune with nature's laws, turn on your evening news. turn on the national news, see all of the wars, all of the muggings, all of the genocide. At any given moment, there's genocide somewhere going on. The human trafficking, the list goes on and on. The car accidents, how many people die every day senselessly because we're so stupid to understand that this was a ridiculous invention, the way that they created this form of transportation. But it's just pus. It's just pus and mucus. We still have our drive-throughs. We can get it within 2 minutes. I can drive over. There's about at the end of my street. There's like 5 or 6 fast food joints in almost literally 100-yard distance. Just like boom, boom, boom. And so I could have a Big Mac in my hand within 3 minutes. Just jump in my car, run up there, beat through. And look at that, because look at what happens to us when we get further and further and further from nature, because it started off where it was hard to get the mucus. You could go pick some fruit if you were in the right environment for you, but you had to work really hard to kill one animal. And so you weren't going to be gluttonous on that one animal. You might eat an animal once every week or so. But you're going to be dealing with the plant-based stuff if you're in the right environment. Of course, humans went to these as explorers and trying to go off, and maybe it was because climate change was happening. There's different theories on why did Africans even leave Africa? Why did people move to cooler climates? It makes sense from the standpoint of obstruction, because as you eat obstructing foods, traditionally those people want a cooler climate. Those are the people that's using air conditioning and all this kind of stuff. When I go into people's homes or go out there, I rarely do it now, but it's when I have to go out into like public spaces, they got it 60 degrees in the house.
Right.
And inside buildings 60, 65, 70. 75 is too cold for me. I got the heat on if it goes below 75. I keep my house around 80, 83. Brother Air keeps his house at between 85 and 90 degrees. So we get further and further and further, and as we get further, it seemingly becomes easier to get the pus. The pus becomes more accessible. Yeah. And that's why it's so easy, because it used to be hard. You had to hunt, and like I said, you couldn't have it that easy. Now you can just roll up the street.
Definitely not.
And it's way too easy, and so that
right.
And then it becomes the downward cycle, because what? Because it's so much easier. You don't have to work to do it. You don't have to run. All you have to do is sit and roll up. Like, hey, give me two double cheeseburgers with bacon. You don't have to. At least you had to run to try to chase something, and now you just roll on up. And people.
That's the plantation, man.
Yeah.
That's the plantation, because that's another part of looking at the plantation model is the plantation is a place where senseless death is okay. The plantation is where that's okay. Right. You can kill somebody, doesn't matter. You can create a world where people die regularly, it doesn't matter. That's why if you live in a place where there's cars, you're in a level of a plantation. If you live in a place where bad foods are available anywhere, you're in a plantation. If you have a place where cigarettes and alcohol, malt liquor are available, you're in a plantation. If you're in a place where you can have a career that's unhealthy, whether it's playing football and destroying your body or working in a factory with chemicals, you're in a plantation. you know. So it's
And it
like,
comes down to how bad do you want to be free? Who really wants to be free? Now, that's the question.
Exactly.
Who really wants to be free?
Yeah, exactly. And the mucusless diet comes in there because if you're a vegan, a regular fad vegan, you need the vegan restaurants. You need the you could even say you need the kitchen appliances. You need factories to produce the vegan meat options usually.
The process.
You need, you know what I mean? You need something processed. You don't find, like, veggie burgers don't grow on trees.
Right.
You know, you know what I mean? Like almond milk chocolate shakes. You don't get those soft serve from a tree.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like so all these things fall under the plantation model, and Arnold Ehret is talking about something different. That's why when we talk about the even the fatty fruits like the avocados and stuff, the durian. I had a durian the other day, a month ago, I believe. Maybe it was 3 weeks ago. And I started eating so much mucus after that durian because it just dropped me right down into a mucus level. Like,
right.
And so dealing with these fatty fruits, like Arnold Ehret is just saying that's not the human level. That's the orangutan level. Like an orangutan might eat durian all day. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean you're supposed to. An orangutan is 500 pounds. You're 90 to 130. Like, you're not supposed to be 400 pounds on a vegan diet, on a fruitarian diet. An orangutan can just like rip a tree in half. You can't do it, so don't try.
And especially us in America, like we have to go through an entire mental cleansing, and we can use different strategies for that. I used to just watch African documentaries of African people, or various indigenous people, or Middle Eastern, just people that had naturally small frames, naturally skinny people from an American type of mindset and standpoint. You would look at them as they're like, oh, they're too skinny. Oh, they're poor them. They're not eating enough. We're Americans. We're nice and healthily plump. But those guys, I wish I could send them a burger. It's like, what you have to understand is they're the ones that are normal looking. No matter what they're eating, physiologically, they're still a little closer to a human form. In terms of a slender human form, that's naturally slender. That's not anorexically slender. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about a natural human kind of form and frame, and it's usually much smaller than what we think from an American type of Western standpoint, because we've just went so overboard to the point where obesity looks more normal and is really more accepted at this point than having a small frame and being real skinny. At least for males. I mean, I don't know. That's why we don't talk about weight and self-image in that way, because it gets it's so mired in pus and mucus. Because on one hand you have that people think, oh, I'm too skinny, I'm too small frame, I want to be bigger, I want to have muscles, and I want to this whole kind of that alpha male ape type of real animal vibe. Then on the other hand you have females that are obsessed with being skinny, and they already might be skinny, and they're like, oh no, I'm not gonna eat anything today, and I'm getting too skinny and all this kind of stuff. It's like, just eat something. You're hungry. Just eat a salad.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
You're obstructed. You're obstructed.
Yeah, like your mentality. Like focus on the cleanliness. Don't focus on the weight.
Right.
The weight don't really have anything to do with anything. I mean, obviously, if you're carrying around a couple extra 100 pounds of waste, it just needs to be eliminated. Simple as that. Just eliminate it. If you're obviously seems like you're too skinny, and people say, oh well, I'm underweight. It was like, well, again, physiologically, that's a mucus condition. And that's always proven when people fast and they gain weight. Because if you're a uric acid type and you're so malabsorbed and you got so much acid, it's like these concentrated acid all the way through your body, these little pus bubbles, just all up and down your tissue system and in there. It's like that'll, as you start to become more alkaline physiologically, some of that kind of opens up. And then your weight is going to increase. You're going to take on more what they call water weight. The whole water thing, we won't get into that now. But just, that kind of thing. 'Cause whenever I'm eating vegetables, I always, I can tell that it's a different type of weight than fat weight.
Oh, yeah.
Than the weight that comes from fat. It's very different, where you can be kind of, because I'm in a little vegetable eating mode now. So you got my little plump going on here and there. But after a day or two of fasting, I noticed that so-called water weight, it goes really quickly. It's like it just eliminates. Whereas if you got your fatty fat from the avocados and eating too many oils and that kind of stuff, there's a lot more physiological interference that's created, and it takes a lot longer to eliminate that, and it doesn't eliminate as easy either. Like, you had to feel some negative results from that.
Right.
Do you ever wake up in the morning feeling bad? I mean really bad? Blowing your nose and coughing up green slime bad? What if I told you that the foods you eat are causing mucus to back up in your body? The good news is this waste can be eliminated naturally. Discover the simplest and most powerful natural lifestyle secret that has improved the lives of thousands. Professor Arnold Ehret's Mucusless Diet Healing System, annotated, revised, and edited by Professor Spira, is a complete course for those who desire to take their health into their own hands. You will learn how to naturally get rid of that annoying stuffy nose, soothe your nasty cough, melt away unwanted body fat, prevent dangerous health issues, and heal yourself of painful illnesses. Where are my real brothers and sisters at? You think you're hard? You think you're a revolutionary? Then you got to be talking about health. Learning to control what you put into your mouth is the most revolutionary thing you can do. Check out the book that inspired Dr. Sebi, Lila Africa, and many others. Visit www.mucusfreelife.com/revised-mucusless-diet to get your copy today while supplies last.